Hey everyone, Mo here, and before the video begins, I just want to let you guys know that my schedule has opened up for me to do coaching again. So if you're interested in private one-on-one coaching for me to help you, whether you're a newer player and you want to excel at the game very quickly and learn the fundamentals without developing any bad habits early, or if you're an experienced player who's already maybe platinum or diamond in your top 1%, but you need some help filling in the gap to get you to that 0.01%, to make you just some of the best, then hit me up on Discord and I can get you in some private one-on-one coaching lessons to help you polish up any skills you want to refine and help you learn all of the secrets to becoming a top player. That's it. I hope you enjoy the video. Hey everybody, Mo here, and in this video I'm going to be bringing you guys a deck guide for dummies on the new Discard Midrange deck of Draven Sion. So, Discard Midrange is a very new archetype that we just got with the expansion of our Into the Bandlewood expansion, I guess. I think that's the name of it. Sorry, I couldn't remember the name of it, but we got Sion, we got a bunch of new discard outlets, and they really did print a whole bunch of cards to make Discard Midrange not only a viable deck, but in my opinion, now it's going to be the best deck in the game. Now that Silver Auction has been nerfed, if you don't know, Ruin Runner got hot nerfed to be a 6-3, Merciless Hunter got hot nerfed to be a 4-2, which makes that card basically unplayable. So with that card out of the meta, this is definitely the deck to beat now in tournaments. It's the deck that I think will probably show up the most and do the best at Worlds this upcoming weekend. So this deck is looking really strong. People have already, it was the first deck to hit Masters in North America, the second deck to hit Masters in North America. It's the most played, most represented deck in top 8 right now for North American ladder. So this deck is really strong, especially on ladder, and it'll be a lot stronger in tournaments too whenever you get to fine tune it to be a specific tournament build. So this is the deck we're going to be going over today. So before we get into the video, I want to remind you guys that 80% of the people that watch my videos aren't actually subscribed to me. So if you could do me a huge favor and click that subscriber icon, click that bell, it helps me out so much with the YouTube algorithm, and I'd really appreciate it. So that's it for the intro. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Alright, so for the first part here, we're going to go over each card in the deck, why it's in the deck, the purpose it serves in the deck. So we'll just start at the top here, go all the way to the bottom, the cheapest cards, most expensive cards. I'll go over why I put some cards in my deck, why I didn't put other cards in my deck, or why they aren't in my deck. So I'll start with Portal Cannon, 3 Portal Cannon. 3 Portal Cannon is kind of like a must. The card is 0 mana, discard something, so it synergizes super well with everything, so you can get a cheeky 0 mana discard survival skills that your opponent's not paying attention to, 0 mana discard a Grenadier to get a free blocker if your opponent's not paying attention. You need a bunch of really cheeky things with the Portal Cannon. If you guys might have seen in my Discard aggro video, I talked about how broken Portal Cannon is at being able to just burst speed out stuff that your opponent can't really play around or doesn't play around. Nobody will ever play around a Portal Cannon discarding something because it's just not common and it's something really hard to do. So a lot of people aren't going to play around it, so that gives you even more of an advantage whenever it does happen. On top of all of that, having elusive blockers is really important right now. As we know, Nami just got released, a bunch of new elusives got released, as well as we need ways to protect ourselves from old elusives, like Zed Lulu just won Seasonal. So we need ways to be able to block a bunch of elusives, and this gives you ways to do that, which is super nice. Next, we'll go into Draven's biggest fan. So the reason I'm playing Draven's biggest fan in this deck is because I'm only on 2 Draven, and Draven is super important. Having an axe goes along with Portal Cannon. It's 0 mana, discard something to get the effect, so 0 mana, discard Lost Soul. Axes are really nice, as well as just discard fodder, because you can discard the axes if you need to with things like Grave Position, and get value that way. So I'm playing 2 biggest fans because I'm only on 2 Draven, because I want to guarantee I can have the Draven, or make my odds really high that I have Draven, so I'm kind of cheating and playing 4 Dravens in a way. As well as having more 1-drops here makes you good into aggro, or at least better into aggro. So this is very much better into aggro than the average list will do, because you get to play additional 1-drops, which is super nice. 3 Reborn Grenadier, not really much to say here. It's just a nice card. If you discard it, you get 5 damage turn 1s. If you're trying to take an aggro route, it gives you a burst speed blocker against mid-range decks if you're trying to grind them out that way. And so yeah, there's not really much to say about it. It's just a good card. Zonite Urchin, same thing, good card. It's just 1 mana, refills itself, so that's good. It can give you the power of 5 damage on turn 1, which is really good. It can discard something big in the mid game. Just having a turn 1 play that also starts your engine off. Like if you just go turn 1 Lost Soul, that's really good. If you go turn 1 discard Fallen Rider, that's really good, because you now have this like really powerful turn 2 option. That's like a really good card to have, which we'll get into here in a minute. So Zonite Urchin is just a very standard discard card, 1-drop play unit type thing. Fallen Rider, a really powerful unit. A 2-mana 4/2 Fearsome is really, really good. It's a good way to beat a lot of either aggro decks or just smaller decks in general, like Bandletree, for instance. Bandletree is typically not a good matchup for you in the Draven Sion deck, but with things like Fallen Rider, because you have Fearsome, they don't have a lot of Fearsome blockers early on. You can push through quite a bit of damage, so that way in the later games you can kind of just win with Get Excited and win with your burn spells that way. 2, Grave Physician. Grave Physician, I mean, just really good card. It discards stuff, which helps you with your game plan. You're always going to want to be discarding like Lost Souls and discarding things, as well as it draws you a unit, and that part is really, really important. So it's a 2-mana 2/2, so it's a nice little chump blocker that just like replaces itself, basically. You can discard a Draven X, draw a champion, or sorry, not champion, draw a unit. You can discard a Lost Soul, get another unit. So sometimes you're like discarding cards when really all you're doing is just playing a 2/2 body, triggering this Lost Soul, which is really, really good. And then after all that, you still get to draw another unit and get to combo off with that unit and start doing stuff there. So Grave Physician really, really slept on. I think 3 might be too many, but 2 is, I wouldn't want to go under 2. So 3 rummage, burst speed, discarding cards is good. You can burst speed in your Grenadier. You can go ahead and get like survival skills, drawing cards is nice. Draven, because, you know, 3 mana 3/3 Draven is really nice with quick attack. Then also the axes have 0 mana, being able to go ahead and discard things at 0 mana is really, really good. So yeah, Draven's good. I only have 2 Draven because I have 1 Vi. We'll talk about that in a second. 3, Get Excited. Most of the time these are removal spells, but don't forget you can play Get Excited on the face. I watched a game today from a tournament where the Draven Sion player actually had enough Overwhelm. Their hand was like double Get Excited and a Mystic Shot. So they had enough to where if Sion just attacked and they got him down, the opponent, to 8 HP, they could finish them off with like Get Excited, Mystic Shot. But instead they opted to use their Get Exciteds for units, for removal, and because of that, the Draven Sion player didn't actually have enough reach to be able to kill the opponent. So be wary. Remember that you can use Get Excited as face damage in niche scenarios towards the end there if you do have that really big mid game or the overwhelm units and stuff like that. But it also can go double up as a removal spell, which is really nice. Sun Dredger is the same thing as Johnite Urchin. It's just a nice body. 3 mana 4/3 is great. 4 power allows you to kill Ruin Runner, and having 3 HP makes it so you don't take a bunch of overwhelm damage. You only take 3. So you're trading a 3 mana unit for a 5 mana unit, and you're only taking 3 damage for it. That's really, really good value. It's just a pretty decently sized unit for the mid game. We skip our 4 drops and we just go straight to 5 drops. So Ancient Warmonger, this card's pretty solid as a 5 mana 5/5 overwhelm. That's okay. But having the ability to discard it and make a unit +2/+0 is really, really good. So for instance, this is where we're going to start talking about 5. So survival skills is just in here. I played 3 because making sure your unit can't die is huge. If you have Ancient Warmonger in play, you give it +2/+0 from another Ancient Warmonger, right? And it's really, really big. If your opponent tries to do stuff like Get Excited or Challenger it or something like that, and you can discard a survival skills to make this not die, now you have this huge overwhelm unit that doesn't die, and it's guaranteed to push a bunch of damage through, and that's super, super big. The reason I'm on 3 is because I think we're in a really mid-range heavy meta right now, especially in tournaments, and more survival skills the better. Survival skills completely blows out a lot of players if you're playing against the Sivir Auction deck, which this deck does well into, and they try to do something like Merciless Hunter onto your Draven, pull Draven in with a quick attack unit, whether that's Sivir or Auction. They go, pull Draven in with Sivir. If all you do is just go, okay, axe survival skills, now my Draven lives because it has Undying, that is a huge swing and can single-handedly win you a lot of games. Opponents either not playing around survival skills or being forced to play around it and just do really awkward things is really, really good for you. It's really hard to play around something like survival skills because eventually you're going to have to try to kill, or your opponent's going to have to try to kill your big unit. But they can't really ever do that well without forcing out a bunch of their removal spells and their resources. Then they force out your survival skills, and then you still have the unit, so they have to spend even more resources. And it's just, this card is super good in a mid-range matchup where you're just going toe-to-toe with units, and you just make your unit not die. So I play a 1 of Vi. Vi is super underrated right now, especially in this style of deck. If you play Vi on turn 5, Axe plus Ancient Warmonger, that's +4 right there. So like that alone can give your Vi, if your Vi's only at 6, so if you've only played 4 cards since Vi, you can go Axe, discard Warmonger onto the Vi, +4, boom, you have a leveled Vi on turn 5. That's really easy. On top of that, if you get a big Vi, and you have a Sion, this is one of the few times that discarding Sion can actually be really good for you. Sion is a super awkward card where if you discard him, you give the biggest thing Overwhelm, and that most of the time is very unimpressive when your biggest unit is a 4-3. This 5-5, it already has Overwhelm. So your biggest unit's like a 4-3 or a 3-3 Draven or a 4-2 Fearsome unit. Fearsome Overwhelm is kind of like whatever. So being able to abuse the fact that you can give something Overwhelm by discarding Sion and putting that onto a big thing like a 10 power Vi that has Challenger. Challenger Overwhelm is really, really good because you already want to pull in the small unit so you make sure your Vi lives. If you pull in a 1 HP unit with a leveled Vi and give it Overwhelm, you're now going to hit your opponent for 14 damage. Just with a leveled Vi and it having Overwhelm on a 1 HP unit. That alone like almost one-shots the opponent, which is absolutely insane, right? So that is super, super big, and that's why I like it. And again, we're in a mid-range heavy meta, so being able to dictate how to pull your opponent's actions in and pull your opponent's smaller units with the Vi and kind of control the board with this tough challenger unit can be very, very impactful. So after that, we have triple Sion. Obviously, I'm not going to go over this. Sion, good card. You play Sion. It's really, really big. It dies. It rallies. The only card that really stops this in the meta right now is Mini Morph. Even if your opponent stress defenses you, it's not the worst thing in the world because you still have a damn Sion in play. So that doesn't matter. It stops you for like one turn, and then you just hit them again. If they do Mini Morph you, that kind of sucks, but that's why I like Vi in this deck, because Vi is actually another like literal game-ending threat, whereas having a Draven isn't. Like Draven is just good in the early game and kind of mid-game, but it's not usually like a game-winning threat, whereas Vi can actually force out a Mini-Morph. If you play Vi and get a 10-power Vi, a lot of times your opponent's going to have to Mini-Morph that or do something to it, waste some sort of spell to deal with this Vi. And then after they do that, you're just going to slam this big dick Sion in play and say like, okay, Mr. Opponent, you just used your Mini-Morph or you just used your Vengeance, like deal with this Sion now. And you're just getting more value and more ways to just kind of choke the resources of your opponent, and having big finishers like that is really, really big. The last card we're going to talk about is Lost Soul. This card's fucking broken. This card is absolutely broken. Imagine if Ledros was like a 4-drop, and that's what this is. This is Lost Soul. If you can discard it once, you get a 4-3 challenge unit. This is why this deck is so good right now, because we're in a mid-range meta. You discard this card, you get a 4-3 challenger. You use this to just 1-for-1 your opponent. That's all you have to do. You don't even need anything super crazy. You just need to 1-for-1. You get another Lost Soul in your hand. You discard that Lost Soul. You get a Twin Blade Revenant. You use this Revenant to 1-for-1 your opponent. But it's not a 1-for-1 because you get a Lost Soul in your hand. And you literally repeat this process like 2 or 3 times, and you will just out-grind any other mid-range deck right now. Sever Auction, you will out-grind them. This card has 4 power, so it kills Ruin Runner. It kills Sivir. It kills any unit they play outside of like combat tricks. And even then, they're using combat tricks now on the defensive turns to make sure their unit doesn't die to the challenger. And then this dies, they just replay it because they're going to discard this with something like a Draven Axe or a Rummage or anything of that nature. And it's just super, super crazy. This card is just giga crazy broken. And it's an auto 3 of in every single one of these lists because of just how nuts it is. So that is every card in the deck. That's the purpose behind each card, why the numbers behind each card. This list is just super refined. And now we're going to go over the curves of the deck and the general play patterns, what you're looking to try to do with the deck. And then we're going to go over a Mulligan guide. Alright, so for the next part of the video, we're going to go over the curves of the deck and the different play patterns. So I'm going to go over what your standard, just very standard curve looks like. Then I'll go over what maybe a more aggressive, high-rolly kind of curve looks like. And then we're just going to talk about some of the things to look out for when you're playing this style of deck. So your very standard curve is going to be something like Zonite Urchin on turn 1, discard Fallen Rider, play the 4-2 Risen Rider on turn 2, play Draven on turn 3, play like Sump Drudger, or maybe you've discarded a Lost Soul, play Twin Blade on 4, play Vi on 5, something like that. Alright, so it's just something very standard. This has the mid-rangey curve of, oh, it's turn 1, I play my 1-drop. Oh, it's turn 2, I play my 2-drop. Oh, it's turn 3, I play my 3-drop. Because at the end of the day, this is a mid-range deck. It's not an aggro deck. You can have some aggro draws for sure. Like, you can go turn 1 Zonite Urchin into like a Fallen Rider, right? And then turn 2 has some nutty double Poro Cannon, double Grenadier, and then now you're swinging for like 12 damage on turn 2. Or do half, like I've been hit for 11 damage on turn 3 before. So you definitely have some aggro draws you can do with this deck. For the most part, this is still just a very standard mid-range deck. And that just has something, you know, kind of crazy over the top. And that's what I've been saying for the last 2 metas that have put tier 1 decks at tier 1, is they have a very strong power level and a very strong base level. And then they also have these crazy nut draws or nut cards, and that's why they end up being tier 1. You know, like the Shurima, Ionia, Severed Zed style deck. That deck just has a very strong level 1, like it's a very strong base level, but you also randomly OTK your opponent. Same with Zed Lulu. It's like it's very strong, elusive. It's, you know, it's like okay, but then you start drawing rallies and you just like win the game. This deck just has a very standard mid-range curve, but then sometimes you're randomly just killing your opponent on turn 2 or turn 3, and that's usually, you know, really good for you. Some of the aggro draws do kind of look crazy. They're like turn 1's on it into Grenadier, boom, that's 5 damage, that's a quarter of your opponent's health. Turn 2, you can try and play Grave Physician, discard something, or maybe you can Poro Cannon out a Risen Rider, and then your turn 3 is going to be like Draven, or you can get even crazier with like another Sonic Grenadier, or turn 3 you can play a 4-3. Some style like that, and those are your typical like your aggro curves, and you want to finish it by burning them out with Get Excited, or burning them out with like a Vi, discard a Sion, or something like that. So those are your 2 like main curves, is just finding some weird aggro line of like Zonite Grenadier on turn 1, or just play your 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, 4 drop on curve because you're a mid-range deck. As far as play patterns go, a couple things to look out for is, 1, I would always keep Lost Soul. We'll go over this in the Mulligan portion, but look to discard your Lost Soul as much as possible, because the 4-3 is just super broken. Like, this card alone is really broken. This is, you know, I've already said it, it's the best card in your deck, so just try and discard this and get your Twin Blade, and that's how you beat a lot of the other mid-range decks, is you sit there and you just go Lost Soul, oops, you go Lost Soul, play Twin Blade 1 for 1 you, get it back 1 for 1 you, and then your opponent's going to run out of cards. Meanwhile, you never run out of cards because you just keep constantly getting this 4-3 challenger over and over again, which is pretty nuts. The other thing I would look out for is try to level your Vi if you can on turn 5. Or not level Vi, but get Vi as big as possible. Because this deck does play Vi, and Vi is a humongous deal in the mirror match, as well as a good way to beat some of the aggro decks, because it gives you a way to actually end the game before you get ran over. Then I would look to try, and maybe if you do have a line that says like, okay, turn 2 you can play Risen Rider, or turn 2 you can play Poros out, it might just straight up be better to play the Poros, that way you get the extra triggers on Vi and try and make Vi as big as possible. You know, I already said that you can Axe away Warmonger. If you go Axe Warmonger onto Vi, then that's +4 to your Vi for 0 mana, so that's almost half of Vi's level up condition right there alone. So I mean, it is, you know, half of the plus. She can only get +8, so that right there is half of it for 0 mana. You can just discard Warmonger, boom. You know, so try and look for that, because Vi is going to be the fastest way for you to end the game before Sion comes down. And then after, obviously, you can just slam Sion on 7 and then you win the game. So those are the play patterns I would look for, is find ways to level your Vi if you can, and play around survival skills if you can, and then try and determine early on if you have the aggro opener, if you have a more mid-range opener. For the aggro opener, I would say if you doesn't look like you can kill your opponent by turn 5, you probably don't go for the aggro opener. Sometimes it's better just to use the Grenadier as a blocker. I know that's something I see people do all the time, where they're like, oh, well, I can Zonite Grenadier on turn 1, so I might as well, when, you know, it might just be better for them if they're against an aggro deck. It might be better for them to just keep the Grenadier as a burst speed blocker. So typically how it goes is, if you're against an aggro deck, you're probably not aggroing them down. If you're against a slower control style or another mid-rangey deck, you have the ability to aggro them down. It just depends on how aggro your hand is. So that's going to be it for the play pattern and curve style. Now we're just going to get into the Mulligan guide, and in this I'm going to tell you how to mulligan against each of the 3 major archetypes, aggro, control, and mid-range, and what cards you really want to look for in those matchups. Alright, so for the final portion of this video, we're going to go over different mulligans and mulligan guides against each of the 3 major archetypes. So against control, what you're going to want to look for here, and against like mid-range, what you're going to want to look for here, and against aggro, what you're going to want to look for. So we're going to cover the baseline of things you will always keep in your opening hand, and that is going to be Lost Soul. You always keep Lost Soul against aggro, mid-range, and control. This card is absolutely nuts. It's just having infinite Twin Blades is really good against any type of archetype. Having infinite discard fodder is really good to help your deck continue to move on and be a really good engine. Draven is a card that you will always keep against aggro, mid-range, and control, because Draven is really good against blocking against aggro, and it's really good at applying pressure versus mid-range and control, and it also applies pressure against aggro also. So those are the two cards that I'd say I'll always keep. And of course, Vi, I would always keep in my opening hand. If you're not keeping Vi, then you shouldn't be playing Vi, because, you know, Vi is obviously good when she gets to see you play cards. So if you keep her in your opening hand, then you're good. So those are cards I always keep, are Lost Soul, Vi, and Draven. So let's go against aggro. So against aggro, what you really want to see is going to be your biggest fan, your Urchin, and probably at least one Grenadier. So this is because you just want to match their early game pressure. That's all you have to do. Against aggro, I say this in every video, your main goal against aggro is to run them out of cards. You do that by just playing units as fast as they do, blocking their units, and then you end up winning because you have big units on turns, you know, 5, 6, and 7, and they're still over here playing 2/2s and 3/3s on turns 5, 6, and 7. So if you can run them out of cards, you're probably going to win. And you do that by staying healthy and just going, oh, you played a 1-drop, I'm going to play biggest fan, block. Oh, you played a 2-drop, I'm going to play like Poro Cannon, or I'm going to play my Risen, like even if you just play Fallen Riders or 3-1 or Great Physician or something like that, like, oh, I'm going to play a 2-drop and they can trade. Oh, you played a 3-drop, okay, well, I'll play my Draven, I'll even trade my Draven into you just to keep my HP as high as possible. So your main goal when you play against aggro is to just run them out of cards while keeping your HP high enough so you don't just get burned out by decimates and stuff like that. So that's your main goal, especially if you're against elusives, like elusive aggro. Your best thing is to try and get, like, you know, Poro Cannon. Try and find the cards that help you out there. So, like, obviously, biggest fan and Sion and Urchin aren't going to be the best 1-drops if you're against elusive aggro, but Poro Cannon is nuts because this is 1 card and it gives you 2 blockers. So you want to look for that depending on what type of aggro you're in. When you're against other mid-range decks, the best cards you could look for are going to be your survival skills. Obviously, Vi, we already said that, but this is mainly just going to be like survival skills and get excited. Your early game cards are nice, like the Grenadier is nice, you know, Urchin and all that type of stuff, but Great Physician is, you know, decent. I would keep Great Physician in the Mulligan because it helps you continue to outgrind your opponent. And in mid-range matchups, it's about trying to outgrind your opponent as well as trying to take over board control. So against aggro, your goal is to just run them out of cards. Against mid-range, your goal is to try to take board control. And taking board control is really easy when you play things like Draven with survival skills into Vi. Like, when you do a curve like that where it's basically you have units on board and your opponent now has to play cards to try and catch up, you have a ginormous advantage. You want to try and push that advantage, and you get that by doing things like turn 1 Urchin, discard Fallen Rider. Like, this is where your general mid-range curve comes into play and makes it really good, and then you just top it off with something like a survival skills, a get excited, like a removal spell, a spell that says your unit can't die, or a Vi that's just too big for your opponent to really deal with. And that's how you end up taking over the mid-range matchup, is just board control. This is one giant game of board control. And against control, the cards you really want to see are going to be Draven, because Draven is really good here, and then Sump Treacher. So against most control decks, they can't really deal with 3 HP units or large units. So your early game is going to be kind of poo-poo, because they can deal with your 2/1s, they can deal with your 4/2, they can deal with all of your 1 and 2 HP units really well. But when you start playing 3/3s, 4/3s, like big ass, you know, 10/4 tough units, and then Sion, even your 4/3 right here, they can't deal with this card ever, because this card's kind of like a better version of, what is that card's name? The 3-drop that just, the Undying. This is just a better version of the Undying. It costs 1 more mana, but it's a 4/3 with Challenger that can block. And whenever it dies, if they kill it, it doesn't matter because it just turns into a Lost Soul, and then you just go ahead and discard Lost Soul, and then boom, now you have, you know, more units again, and you just never run out of units. You're going to want the Sion on 7, of course, just to tax your opponent's resources. So this is another matchup where Vi, you know, I already told you keep Vi in your opener in every opener, but Vi is really good for this reason of taxing resources. You're going to play a Vi, they're going to say, oh damn, I can't actually deal with that unless I use my Minimorph, unless I use my Vengeance, unless I use, you know, something of that nature, like my Stress Defense here. So if they use one of those resources on your Vi, that makes you really happy, because now when you slam Sion on turn 7, they're going to have 1 less resource, so they probably, you know, there's a chance they don't even have a way to deal with Sion now, because they said, oh, shoot, you know, I already used my Minimorph, or I already used my Vengeance, or I just used my Stress Testing on the Vi to keep my, you know, whatever champion alive. I can't deal with this giant Sion now, you're going to hit me for 20. And that feels really good for you as the Sion player and bad for the control player. So those are the cards I would look for in the mulligans. And that's going to be it for this deck guide. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, and let me know in the comments below what deck you want to see a deck guide on next. I'm thinking maybe we can go over Starfish. I'm thinking maybe we can go over Bandletree. Let me know what you guys want to see as far as deck guides go, as far as gameplay goes. So that's it. Make sure to join my Discord. It's going to be in the description below. Follow me on Twitch. I stream on there almost every single day. And sub here on YouTube because I post videos Monday through Friday. That's going to be it. I'll see you guys in the next video.